Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, 13th of July, 2023. We're going to do some market analysis. Remember, this presentation is for education purposes only and not intended as investment advice. Please take a moment to read the disclaimer. Trading is risky. Make sure you know what you're doing and don't risk more capital than you can afford to lose. A little bit about myself. Those of you who are regular visitors will have seen this every single time, so been doing it a long time. So we're going to do some top-down approach, top-down analysis on some gold, the gold charts, and maybe the British pound and the euro dollar. And I also want to have a look at the dollar index as well to just highlight some of the moves in the currency pairs. We're also going to look at any upcoming news today, and I'm also going to look at the inflation number that came out yesterday, which obviously had a massive impact on markets. And then we're going to show you how to use some free tools that we have, no cost now or ever. And if you want access to them, let's get this out of the way. It's plus.zenfinex.com. Just register and I'll show you how to use some of these tools. There are videos on the portal to show you how to use some of these tools, but we're mainly going to cover the calendar, technical views, and featured ideas this morning. So let's get straight to charts, which is always the fun part. In fact, let's go to news first, because let's cover what happened yesterday in terms of inflation rates in the US. So on Tuesday, I did some analysis on gold and highlighted some levels, which we're going to also have a look at because they beautifully match the levels we're drawing in on Tuesday. And so let's have a quick look at what happened with the inflation rate month on month. So it was actually, let me just get the right number here. Yeah, so here, projected to be, it was 4% last time, year on year. It was forecast to come down to 3.2. It actually came down more than expected. And let's have a look at the impact that had, for example, on the British pound. So this is a chart that shows you when the moment the news was announced and what happened to, in this case, the British pound against the US dollar 4 hours after the event. So we're looking at a sort of 85 pip move in one direction, basically up. I mean, if I look at it from a smaller window, 15 minutes, you'll see that it gapped up, messed around a little bit, and then in the subsequent hours, you know, it just continued to go up. And after news, and we'll take a look at British pound, and it did very, very similar things to the euro dollar, one direction. So what has happened, right? Let's have a bit of a discussion about what has happened and what caused gold and other pairs to move the way they did. So clearly, right, inflation is coming down faster than had been forecast and lower than the previous month. So that's a good thing in terms of controlling inflation. Controlling inflation obviously has a positive effect, you know, usually a positive effect on the indices. And I guess the major, and I'm going to go straight to it rather than beat around the bush. I want to show you the dollar index, because the dollar index really drives a lot of the currency markets in terms of, you know, the major pairs, you know, euro against the US dollar, British pound against the dollar, US dollar against the JPY. And we'll look at all three of those and see how the dollar was affected by that. So if I just go to, unfortunately, I don't have dollar index on my MetaTrader 5, so we can just look at it on trading view. So this is the US dollar index. So this is an index those of you who don't know what it is, I'm sure most of you do. And, do feel free to ask questions. But this has been the rise in the strength of the dollar, almost, in a very sort of, I won't say parabolic, but certainly in an upward direction, peaked. Let me just move this thing out of the way so I can see the dates on here. It sort of peaked around October, and the dollar has been weakening, ever since. And really, those of you, who know how I trade and operate, these levels were important. And if I just magnify this a little bit, let me get rid of that for a second. I don't usually use TradingView that much, but we don't have dollar index on the instrument list on MetaTrader. So just want to make sure that everything's working here. So we looked at levels here, right? So back in April 22, the dollar started gaining strength, really as inflation had started to increase. And the fact that the dollar has dropped because inflation has theoretically peaked in the US anyway, it's had a downward move on the dollar, which I won't go into the fundamentals too much, but it has a very positive effect on the economy, basically, because dollar is used in a lot of commodities. It's used in a lot of big transactions across the world. It's the main currency, and the fact that it's just fallen below these levels here indicate to me that other currencies that you're going to be trading or that you do trade, will be impacted by that. So let's have a look at some currencies that were affected by the dollar index. So we see here and this is a daily chart, by the way. So for the last, 1, 2, 3, let me magnify this a little bit. One, two, three. For the last few days, it's been broke through this level of support here. It's broken through these levels here. I mean, the dollar index isn't necessarily a traded instrument. You can trade it with CFDs, but essentially, the impact of the dollar has impact on currency pairs. What do I mean by that? So let's just go to the charts, which I know everybody enjoys doing. And so we can see here, and I'll go to the daily just to give it a bit of a perspective here. On Tuesday, we talked about these levels here, that if it could break here, let me go back to the hourly, because I can recap what I talked about. So I'd highlighted on Tuesday that, before this news, that we'd created a low, a high, a resistance point had been sort of tested, this level of resistance tested, and I think I pointed out 7 or 8 times that, from a smaller time perspective, how it bumped up against this level, and as soon as it broke out, did a retest on our red line, and then really waited for the news, and then it charged up basically, and that's the price action we saw yesterday. It broke out of this consolidation, reached the first target, and I think we put our sort of target over here for a continuing move. We'll see how this level of consolidation has or what impact it has on the price of the gold CFD. Right. And so the dollar index, right? We were talking about the dollar index. So let's have a look at some currency pairs that are affected by the dollar. We can see here that as we looked at the dollar index a few minutes ago, as that weakened. So what does this mean? Look, British pound against the US dollar. So it's always the first currency that shows the movement, right? So as the dollar weakened, it doesn't necessarily mean the pound strengthened. It just means, in my opinion, that the dollar weakened against the pound. So pound naturally rose as the dollar index fell. I hope that makes sense, but it's like an inverse relationship. I mean, if I go to the JPY, USD against JPY, it'd be a bit clearer, because in this example, USD is listed first, so that would be moving in the same direction in this instance as the dollar index. So we can see here, we counted how many days, 4 or 5 days back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. JPY, we talked about this breakout from this level of resistance. We put some sort of initial targets, with a second target being up here, hit it, and immediately came down, really driven by the dollar index. And again, I'll count back a number of days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's followed the dollar weakness, this being the first of the two label, USD against JPY. So that's showing the direct correlation. So everything that has dollar at the end will go the other way. So if I pick another currency, let's just use Aussie dollar, right? So the USD is second. So weakening dollar means the Aussie goes up. I hope that's I'm explaining this clearly enough. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. So, as I said, on Tuesday, we were hitting these levels of resistance, right? So I think I counted 7 or 8, 1, 2. In fact, let me magnify this a bit. We counted together, didn't we? The times it hit this level of resistance, resistance, resistance. Go back on Tuesday's video, you'll see what I mean. We highlighted the fact that everything, as price retraced, it didn't retrace lower than the previous high. So we're starting to see the upward trend developing. And indeed, once it broke down, it gave us one chance over a period of time to lock in and build in a position for the eventual move. Granted, right, we wouldn't have known what the outcome of inflation was, but in many ways, the chart kind of told us there was a likely breakout, which it actually did. We drew this orange level of resistance by really pointing out the consolidation that was here, and it went exactly to that level, paused, and now, if you are in this trade, be locking in some profits with an eventual goal up to test this previous. Now let me just make sure it's drawn in correctly. I will make that out to a horizontal line so it can go across. So this level of resistance, right, from a larger term perspective, right, is going to be our target too. So we can, as I said, in many of these videos, we use the support and resistance as entry points, stops, and targets. Let's just have a look here. So we've hit this level. We want to see this consolidation now, and there's a chance that it could retrace some of this, come back and retest the top of this. In fact, what I may do the top-down approach on gold again from a fresh chart perspective, taking into account let me just pull up a new chart, and I'll get rid of everything, and we'll start again and take in let's make sure everything that we want here. Right, so we got rid of all the lines. We'll start from a weekly perspective. We've got the same resistance points here. On Tuesday, I talked about these 2 points being important when discussing should the resistance be at the body of the candle or at the peak, and I've kind of put it here. So it's more of a range than an absolute level at 2045. In reality, prices haven't closed on a weekly perspective above 2015. They've poked through it a few times, but have never closed above it. So if we go to the daily perspective, you can see here, and I'll just go back to the weekly to draw any other lines that might be interesting to us, right? So we can see here, I'll just move this up a little bit here. So we can see here, going back to this point here, let me put the cursor on so you can see it. You know, interacted with that, bounced off it, couldn't close above it. So from what I can see, this is an important level, right? So even these two candlesticks couldn't close underneath there. So obviously 1912 is something that we can look at from a weekly perspective, right? So let's now go to the daily. And we're going to start drawing in other lines that are going to be important to us. So let's just make sure we have this line here. And, you know, as discussed on all of my other videos, we're trying to frame the market. We're trying to see where price turns and changes, you know, its direction. And we can see here, there's a large level of consolidation here. We've had the breakout, so let's now go to 4 hourly and put a few more lines in, which will be helpful to us. Let me just get rid of this. So we can see these peaks here, right? So we can see, couldn't close there, tried to get above it, didn't close above it, poked at it, and, you know, we're rapidly approaching it. So these wicks and candles are telling us the rejection of 1971. I could probably go just a little bit lower here because I want to capture as much of that price action as I possibly can. So what have I done, right? I've moved the level of resistance to capture this, here, and we're kind of approaching it. So I do expect a bit of consolidation around here to see if it will break and, you know, head for 1982 basically. So we'll be watching that carefully. And if I go down even further, right, to an hourly perspective, we can then start looking at how the longer term lines, you know, can be used as sort of targets and stops and what have you. So we'll be looking at how price behaves around this level here. So let's just start drawing in some areas where we might be able to use to either bounce off or retrace. Because of course we don't know whether this large move now is going to retrace, retest some of these. Let's just put some consolidation blocks in here. So that's consolidated, right? We can see a level from an hourly perspective where prices try to go here, here, and I'll move it up a little bit here, a little bit down. So what I'm now starting to do is to see how I can trade gold, utilizing my longer term timeframes to act as entry points, stops, and targets. Currently, we're going sideways from an hourly perspective. We can see here this breakout, right, was resisted at these levels here, right? So this move here didn't get lower in here, didn't get lower in. So, you know, I'll do the same thing by just showing you these levels. Let's do that. So clearly, and it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but it's, you know, we can see that every time it breaks, it goes higher, right? So it's had 1, 2, 3. Is this the point now where it will consolidate, retrace, and pull back into here, or try to break the upside? So for the last, so it's 8:19 in London. We'll just have a quick look and see if there's any news that's impacting us. Then we can develop our ideas a little bit further. Let's just go to our news part on the Zenfinex portal, right? So we're just going to look at today and tomorrow. And we can see here we have some news at 1:30, which is Purchasing Managers Index month on month and year on year. So we'll be looking, so they're forecasting an increase in, in the purchasing. Let's just have a look at it and see what last news event had. So what was it telling us last time? It was telling us previous to the previous month, which would have been May, was 0.2. They were forecasting an increase, but then there was an actual number which was less than forecast, right? And we can see that based upon that, the euro dollar moved up around 44 pips from that news announcement. So this is all useful and powerful information, because when we get our news at 1:30, right, we're going to try to see that if prices are, so this was the previous month, is this going to be better or worse than this number? And if I go back to, event chart here, sorry, not this one, price chart, we can go back in time a little bit and see how each of these, actual was 0.3, forecast was that. So this was worse than forecast in June. So that created this upward move. The previous was actual was higher than forecast, this one here, price moved down. So now we can start building an idea, and remember this is the euro dollar, that prices move down. Unfortunately, we don't have gold, which is what we're looking at the moment, but I guess we can look at the CAD, which is very similar, right? So we had that move up in the CAD, and if we go back here, we can see this move. Not sure if that's helping us that much. Doesn't really show us too much. So the CAD may not be the best thing to look at. Let's go back to the euro dollar. We can go back in time and go through these. And I'd encourage you to become familiar with this, because this is really useful, because news is going to come out in what, 3-4 hours time, and we can do some preparation work, right? We can look to see how previous events, whether they were actual or better than forecast or whatever, we can then start looking at these. And we got initial jobless claims, which will be an important news. So 1:30 is going to be good to watch. And going back to our gold chart, we can see that this consolidation, and once we have the news, it will give us some idea whether it's going to come back, retest this level here, and continue going up. And if I draw a channel here, we can start building areas where there's resistance. So if, for example, and I use the word if because nobody knows what's going to be announced in the news. We have to watch this consolidation and use this consolidation levels really as areas that we want to see a breakout and a retest to determine, and we'll have a look on Tuesday whether it's gone up or down, right? So the two things that can happen, which subject to the news, right, it will either come back, retest this level here, because once resistance is broken, very often with a high probability it'll come back and retest this. And then the idea would be that if it's a retest and price action indicated that, then we could be sort of going back up into that direction. At the moment we don't know, so we have to wait and see what the breakout of this level is here. So again, the bottom of the channel is coinciding with the level of this resistance here. So I'll be looking at this level here, and obviously if it breaks to the upside, I'm going to wait for a retest and then see if it can get to the 82 once it gets past 68. So not much distance for the first move, but there is enough distance at the top, and that would be the continuation of the uptrend move, right? So if I go back to 4 hourly, a bit more clearer, we've have been coming down, most of June, consolidated in this area. I think we drew this consolidation out here. And, just to highlight the thesis a little bit more, if I show this as a consolidation area, right, we can see here that prices falsely broke out, went back into here, couldn't get higher than this level here, came back, and depending on your time frame, remember this is 4 hourly. If we go back to the hourly, we might have had, and I'm not suggesting that you would have necessarily got that, but there would have been some opportunities once the breakout had happened to take it down to the next level of support. And that's kind of what we're doing now as well, right? We're seeing if this consolidation breaks, I think the news will push it to one side or the other. We've just got to be, watching it and reacting to our ideas, basically. So, we don't want to get trapped inside this range where it just takes us up and down, up and down, up and down. For me personally, I like to see a little bit of a breakout and a retest, or a retest of this level of support. Let's have a look at maybe some of the US indexes. So let's have a look at NASDAQ. We haven't done much work on this tradable index, and I'll just do this, and I'll get rid of everything first. And NASDAQ's been, on a upward trend for quite some time, driven partly by the AI buzz, and partly by, I guess, the slow reduction of inflation. So let's just see if we can find any levels that we can use to trade this. So again, when looking for a trade, I do the same thing over and over again. So I go to weekly, right? So I'll draw my key turning points from a weekly perspective, right? We can see here there's resistance, support, hit the top over a few weeks, actually, if I magnify this a little bit. So they look like just a few bars. That's quite a reasonable period of time where prices interacted with these two levels. I'll then go to the daily. And remember, what I'm trying to do is frame the market and look for a trade inside that frame, utilizing the boundaries that I have that have been created by the weekly support and resistance. So now we can start putting our daily levels in, and we can see here that, I'm just going to move this up a little bit. So we can see here, and I'll put the cursor on it so you can see, there was some resistance, broke through, retested the level of resistance, became support, broke through it a couple of weeks after that, broke through it, came back down to it, broke through it, resistance. So we can see that this level is important, right? That's why I've drawn it here, in case you're wondering why. And then more recently came up, came down, came up, came down, broken it, and now we might be looking for a retest. But let's start putting some other additional levels in. And so this, what I'm really trying to highlight here is that regardless of what you're trading, right, this is a kind of universal approach. I'm not really liking this level too much. Let me just magnify that a little bit. So what I'm looking for is as much interaction at a particular price as much as possible. And I think we can call this, because look, messed around at this level here, broke through it, became support, broke through it, became resistance, broke through it, and then the lower level became resistance. So clearly, this level might be interesting. And there's also another level here, but we'll see what happens to this level first. What I mean by here, I'm talking about here, because we can see even with this one, it, excuse my throat, there were some levels of support and resistance there. So that's on the daily perspective. So let's get a bit closer now to price. And before we do, from a daily perspective, we're going to just draw another line here. So here we can see resistance, broke through resistance, became support, resistance, 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 broke through, and now it's either going to go up to the sort of 15,611 level, but I'd be looking for a retest. So now if we go to 4-hourly, we can start building some trading ideas around that. So we've put our sort of daily levels in, we've looked at the resistance levels here, we've seen a breakout in line with all the indexes and the dollar, all the things we've just talked about, broken out. And if I magnify this a little bit more, you'll see the resistance levels, and it's broken through. It has retested it from a 4-hourly. If I go to an hourly, you'll see. Remember, these lines have been drawn in from the daily, so don't worry about the precision. Absolutely, what we're looking for is these areas. Look, resistance, resistance, resistance. We broke through, and here's the retest, right? And now it's heading up to this direction here. So we can now start putting some hourly levels in to see if we can find any kind of ideas on where we should be getting in. All of you know who follow me and watch these videos, I don't chase price. I let price come back to me by way of a pullback. So we can see here there's like a channel developing. I just need to expand that channel a little bit. So again, what's happened here is first part of the channel, second part of the channel, interacted lower, and now we've not only now got a frame, we've also got areas where we can look to see if there are any trading opportunities. So we've already had a big move up, a retest, bounce in the direction. If our channel idea stays, then we could see a bit of a reversal here. We've had first indication of a test with this bar here. It's not always a reversal bar, but in this case, what happened? How many hours ago? It's 8:32. 1, 2, 3, 4. It had a bit of a moment here and came back down. Now, if it breaks through this reversal bar, it's meaning that this is just a pause in a continuation on the uptrend. But I will be looking much more closely at this level here. Let's put the level in here, around here. And why am I doing that? Because I want to see if this line here is valid, either as a reversal back down to retest this. With the amount of strength that's already there, I'm not sure about that. So I need to see a breakout. If the channel holds, it will come down and come back to retest this. If the channel isn't valid and it doesn't hold, it continues going up, we'll then be using this line as resistance. Let me just put a short-term resistance. I'm not even sure if I can do that, to be honest with you. Look, I've had this one peaked, didn't close above it, and now it's trying to get above it. So this is going to be our trading area. And if I magnify this a little bit more, right? So we got some short-term support. Well, I'm not even going to call that support. It's just been going up, pausing, going up. It's pausing at this level here at, whatever price that is, 15,363. If, for example, at the end of this 1 hour, it closes below this red line here, then I'll be looking to see if it can break down and then come back into this region here, looking for a short. But if this bar remains strong within the hour, right, we'll be looking to see how it interacts, and then look at our trading opportunities or options when that happens. Right now, it's hitting this level of resistance, and I don't want to be the person who tries to push this away from this now becoming support just yet. So I need to watch this for another another 25 minutes, see how this bar closes. If this bar closes red and below some of these levels here, then clearly this is now acting as resistance, and we may get an opportunity to take it short and come back to these areas here. Or if it continues in its green candles, then we're looking for strength, maybe to target this level up here. Are there any questions, by the way, before I go on to the Zenfinex portal? If there are, please ask now, and if not, I'll continue with looking at the portal. So we've covered gold, and we covered NASDAQ, and I've used exactly the same approach, right? I've used support, resistance, channels, and looking for breakouts of consolidation, right? So at the moment, it's only really been consolidating for a few bars here, so I'm not sure if this can be counted as consolidation or a reversal, or if it's continuation. I don't have enough information here because it's in this tight kind of range here, and I'd be looking for a break out of that tight range. Let's see what we're going to go back to. So we've looked at the possible news coming at 1:30 today. That's clearly going to have an impact. So let's watch out for that and see and utilize the levels we've just drawn and see how they are interacted with, basically. So that's we're 37 minutes in. Have I got time to show you some of the trade ideas? Okay, so let's have a look at featured ideas. This is on the Zenfinex portal that we talked about earlier. Actually, I'll look at the technical views, might be better. Right, so they are, I'm only going to look at majors. I'm not going to look at, in fact, I can select just the majors. So we've got a sell or under pressure for the USD Swiss franc. The British pound looks positive. So let's have a look at the British pound. And, they've drawn, let's see what their conclusions are. So the conclusions are a long above 1.2970 with targets at 1.3030 and the second extension target at 3060. So what they're saying is, and this is based on the 30-minute chart and was posted about an hour ago, right? So they're looking for a continuation of the uptrend. What we can do, and by the way, they're using things like moving averages and Bollinger Bands, RSI and 90 MA. I don't do that. I just look at pure price action and charts. So let's have a look at the British pound compared to the idea that they have here. So let's go to the GBP. So they're continuing with the bullish. So it's been bullish. Again, I'd be looking for some sort of pullback before I take this, because when you have this kind of level of movement, in many ways, you've kind of missed the move. There was this resistance, break out of this resistance to give us this leg up in the upward channel. If I go to the 4-hourly, you'll see what I mean. Right? And, we then go down to hourly. I personally would be wary of taking a long because there is some resistance up the top. I'd rather wait for a pullback in a bullish, because clearly, the British pound is bullish at the moment, right? So we've got to find a way of getting in. If we just get in now, it could just as easily turn back around and stop us out. So if we need to try to get an entry better than it's showing here. I think this channel is probably become invalid now or expanded. And so looking closely at the British pound, right? So we've had this move up after news. Remember, it's the weakness of the dollar that's probably pushing this up. We've seen the dollar index. It's breaking through some levels of support. So we want to see if that dollar weakness continues and then we can have some ideas on how we can play this move. I would like it to come back, really, probably to this level here. Why this level here? So we had this one candle from a 4-hourly perspective, get rejected, break through, retest, and then it, we've got to try to find levels where we can jump into. The safer one is going to be further down, so we can have this continuation of the movement, within the channel. Okay, I think I've covered a few things here. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you have any questions, email me, and if you need any help, again, email me and I'll try to help you as best I can. I hope you enjoyed this morning's session, and we're going to call it a day from now.